Welcome to another episode of Pleasure Pulse. I'm your host, Roma Richardson, and you're joining me on ZIZ on YouTube, I believe on Facebook, and on radio, of course, on 96.1. We are going to get into tonight's discussion, but as usual, before we get into that conversation, I like to take a short break, let everybody know that Pleasure Pulse is live, so you can round up the troops, tell the people that we live, you can share the live yourself, and then come back and we get into tonight's discussion. So stay tuned. Back to Pleasure Pulse. Today is October 21st, and I'm so happy as usual to have you join me here for another conversation. Tuesday, it was a doozy. I feel like everybody is getting caught by whatever flu, colds, whatever it is going around. So I got caught as well. I really would have liked to be here, but sometimes the spirit is willing, but the body is just not. But I'm here. I'm happy to be back here with you for another Tuesday night conversation on pleasure and things related to sex and sexuality. And I have here my guest. She's been here before, no stranger. Welcome. Do you want to introduce yourself? Welcome to my podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm Dr. Joanne Matthew. And I'm happy to be back again.
Happy to have you. Thank you for always being so receptive to my invitations. And we've been trying to do this, since last week, when I was sick. So thank you for being flexible as well. And tonight we're going to talk about something that, it was, I think, a process to get to this decision about what we would talk about tonight. We wanted something that was a good mix of, within the medical field, but still socially, culturally relevant and all of those things. So tonight we are talking about hymens and virginity. And I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation because I know people have lots of thoughts about what both of those, let's call them concepts, are one more real than the other. So let's start with the hymen. I mean, it would have been nice if we had a visual, but the hymen also can look a lot of different ways. So a visual, like one picture could show you what every hymen looks like. So tell us about what the hymen is.
Okay, so the hymen is basically a very thin piece of tissue that covers the opening of the vagina. So that's basically what it is. Usually it is completely closed, but after a while there is a small little opening that develops in it that allows for the passage of menstrual blood to pass through, usually, so that the person with the vagina is able to menstruate properly and easily. But for the most part, that opening is very, very small, and the rest of the tissue covers the opening of the vagina completely. Well, almost completely.
Okay, so does the hymen stay the same size?
No, not necessarily. I mean, everyone is different. So for some persons, the size may increase with age, or it may increase with activity. For example, some persons who are very active, play a lot of sports, it's possible that, they may have some sort of stretching or opening of the the hymen, but for some persons who are not active either,
It can happen.
right?
Yeah. So the hymen that you're born with is not necessarily the hymen that follows you to the rest of your life.
Correct. That's
And
true.
it's not necessarily, these are just leading questions. It's not necessarily connected to sexual activity. That's really what I wanted
Yes.
to go with. You talk about like exercise, activity, or sometimes just the act of living, can cause your hymen to change to let me just say change and leave it there.
Yes.
And where I didn't want to say where like is something, that feel kind of like you
Yeah,
got some
I mean,
connotations, but yeah.
Okay, I understand.
So that can happen regardless of sexual activity. So if that can happen regardless of sexual activity, right? What's the big association with hymens and virginity?
Well, I believe the association comes from the fact that usually when a woman has sexual intercourse for the first time, for example, the penis may penetrate in trying to attempt to enter the vaginal opening, may break the remaining tissue or hymen that has remained. And sometimes that in itself, plus other trauma, may cause some bleeding.
Mm-hmm.
And it is usually assumed that the breaking of the hymen, which you may be aware of by the presence of blood, indicates that the woman's virginity was lost in that act, in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that's where the obsession
Yeah,
but
it's kind of an obsession.
right, that's where it came from.
Yeah.
And because this is common in most women, people assume that it happens in all women.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is it only happens in some women. In other women, they may, for the first time that they may have intercourse, the hymen may be broken, yes, but there may not be any bleeding. And for other women, the hymen may have already been broken, and so during the act of intercourse, there may not be any bleeding. So I think that's where this whole idea of the importance of the hymen comes in, I guess, in society in general.
Yeah. We're gonna come back to this hymen. Hymen is sound like a name, but it really is. But yeah, let's come back to this issue of like hymen and its association with virginity. I know, in some conversations, people express concern about using things like tampons or any other devices or tools that might need to be inserted. So for example, sometimes like if you have a yeast infection, you might need to use a suppository, right? And that's something that you will have to insert into the vagina. But especially with tampons, I hear a lot of conversation about people staying away from tampons because, they don't want to affect their hymen or their virginity or things like that. Like, is that a concern is that like a legitimate concern?
Well, personally, I don't really think it is.
Yeah.
But I think it goes back to what is the definition of virginity.
Mm-hmm.
So my understanding of virginity is that it is a social construct. It's not something that actually exists. It's just something that persons in society have. It's an idea that they came up with. And that has spread, and from far and wide geographically as well as over time. So in a sense, we have to define virginity for ourselves? And does virginity even exist? Now, the fact that whether or not you may have had, a woman, for example, may have had sex or sexual intercourse with another person, does that means that they have lost their virginity? If, the woman was penetrated with fingers or some other object, example, a tampon, does that mean that do they lost their virginity, or do they still keep their virginity? There aren't any definite answers to these questions. So basically, the concept is just a social construct.
It's concerning because it means then that, if we talk about how, okay, we're operating in the real world, so I'm speaking about, our reality and not an ideal situation. If, activity, some slight penetration, non-sexual penetration can cause a change to the hymen, what then happens for the people who have not had any penetrative or even non-penetrative form of sexual activity, but now they are having their virginity, their virginity questioned because, things that people were expecting to see as a result of first sex or whatever it is, they don't see. Or, and this comes into, your field of work. And I asked you about if anybody has ever come to you to do like virginity tests on young people, which somehow I thought that was a long forgotten, long gone thing, but you said otherwise, and you can speak to that. Like, what happens then? Like, if you can cause, some damage to your hymen from anything, but then your parent brings you to the doctor and you ain't get a bleeding, or you ain't have an intact hymen, what do you do?
So for those who may not even be aware of this issue, so a long time ago, people used to do for lack of a better word, the virginity checks, as you said, where they would go to the doctor who would examine the vagina or the vulva to see if the hymen was present or not. And it was assumed that if it was present, that means the persons had never had sexual intercourse and that they were still a virgin. And if it was not present, then it would mean that the person was sexually active. So back in the day, I don't know how many years ago, this was a common practice and doctors used to do it. And basically, I believe the doctor would say whether or not the hymen was present, and it was up to the patient and the relative to interpret that information as they please. Now, sometimes they would pressure the doctor to make a definite statement or decision as to whether or not this person was a virgin or not. It was common for mothers to bring in their young daughters, whether they were teenagers or even younger than 10 years old, because maybe they heard something, maybe they saw something, maybe they were concerned. Sometimes it would be behavior of the children. Whatever the reason, they just wanted to know if the child was a virgin, and so they would take the child to the doctor. And so back in the day, it was taught, in the medical community that, yes, the absence of a hymen would mean that the person was sexually active. But now the information that we've gotten over the years is that we can't 100% be sure that the absence of a hymen means that the person is sexually active. And so now we've come away from that practice, and we usually no longer do it. We don't usually perform virginity checks. But sometimes a doctor may still do the examination to see if the hymen is there or not, and may just tell the parent whether the hymen is there or not, and then the parent would do with that information as they wish. But personally, and a lot of other doctors try to stray away from that practice because of the damage, the psychological damage that may be caused to the child, because the child actually may not be sexually active at all, but for some reason the hymen is absent, and then they may suffer some sort of discrimination or abuse or whatever, punishment from the parent because the doctor said they did not see anything. And so we try to stray away from doing this, from this practice now, because it's not scientifically accurate. We can't 100% say for sure what was the reason why the hymen is not there. And sometimes, even though it's very rare, a person could be sexually active and the hymen may still be there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So because of that, we try to avoid doing it. But, some parents, they still have the old school mindset, and they still take the child to the doctor and still pressure the doctor to check. And I've had the experience before, and I explained to the parent that, this is the practice we no longer do, and they get very upset, and they say, they make comments about they'll just go and see another doctor who will do it. So that's something that, happens. But I think now it's more common that doctors try not to do it, and if they do it, they let the parent make their own interpretation. But that in itself is problematic for the child.
Yeah, I mean, so many issues, but especially the issue of consent is coming up here. I know we talk about consent, especially me, often in terms of sexual activity, like whether someone gives consent for something sexual to happen, to be done to them, or to participate in something, or whatever it is. But in this case, right, like, is one thing if you're sick and you don't like injection, and your parent lift you up out your bed and say you have to take this injection to save your life. Is another thing if your parent lift you up out your bed to take you to a doctor to subject you to a medically unnecessary procedure that is unreliable in a lot of different ways, especially like, are there people who are born without hymens, like people with vaginas who don't have hymens, or who have like little hymenal tissue in the first place?
I haven't heard of it, but I believe it's possible. It could be possible.
Okay. So, and let's just say, sorry, go ahead.
Well, because, the human body is so different. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I know there are persons who are born with hymen, women where there isn't that opening.
Right, and imperforate.
And imperforate hymen, and then that leads to another set of problem. And I'm sure the opposite can happen. Where either you don't born with any, or just a little sliver of tissue, it doesn't even look as if it's there.
Yeah. So it's just like, how do you?
How are you? How can you be sure?
Not even just how can you be sure, but how can we, like, culturally move to a place where the significance of that, the importance of that is so reduced that people don't feel the need to violate people's, bodily autonomy, the control that they have over themselves, to attempt to get answers to a question that the question don't make no sense in the first place, but then you might not get the answers that you're looking for. Like, how can we shift that? Like, can we make that illegal? Can we make it illegal?
That's a very interesting question. Can we make it illegal?
I mean, people might attempt to do it in other ways.
I think usually, I would say most of the times when parents resort to this, it's because there has been a suspicion of sexual assault. Because remember, children under 16,
Yeah.
you know, technically cannot consent. And so I mean, if they are sure, then the procedure is to go through the police to have a proper investigation. But sometimes they may want to do it on their own, and they decide to just go to the doctor on their own. And it's because they heard something or they saw something. I've also realized that it appears that some mothers seem to be very obsessed with their child's virginity and very paranoid, and so sometimes may routinely check on their own.
Yeah.
And so when they notice something strange, that's when they bring them to the
a
doctor and say,
it's like, this is beyond me. I can't identify.
And I don't think I'm seeing the hymen anymore. What do you think? Can you please check? So sometimes it's out of paranoia, and sometimes there's a history of sexual assault. Maybe the child said something, maybe they saw something, maybe there are rumors going around. Those are the most common cases I see that actually voluntarily come.
I think still concerning, and still, the point of it being like an unreliable test. Yeah.
It is.
Should be taken. And I think, if parents are, let's talk about, if parents are concerned about sexual activity, and let's just keep it to people over 16 for now.
Okay.
People who can consent to sexual activity. Then I think the appropriate approach is a conversation, right? Like a discussion about what's going on, and not like an accusatory conversation, because I think sometimes too is like, as soon as you talk to somebody, people assume, it's more than that. So like a conversation that has to be rooted in solutions, realistic ways forward, not in paranoia, or not in like, this was my life experience and I have to prevent them from having the same life experience. And so, even if you share your life experience, it's to help provide them with the tools to do differently, but not to demand that they must do as you said, because you can't really demand anything of another person. But I don't know, sorry, something on you.
From my experience, the majority of the children that are brought in, not necessarily the age, but they have already had the conversation with their mothers, and probably tell the parent that, no, I have not been sexually active. And I even asked the child, have you been sexually active? And they would say no.
And they're trying to get like irrefutable evidence.
Yes.
So what do you do? What do you do in cases like that?
I try to educate them. I try to educate the child, and I try to educate the parent. And some of them are understanding. I'll give it to them. Some of them are understanding, just like you are. Some persons who may be listening tonight may understand, I thought, you could just check and be 100% sure. So you can see that light bulb go off and realize, okay. I mean, isn't much we can do. Yes, we can do it, but it doesn't really give us 100% proof.
Yeah.
And so they understand, and they say thank you, and they go ahead. I don't know what they do when they leave. But then some of them do get angry because they believe, and this I think, I was going to say, the ones who get angry are the older ones who, come from the time where this was a common practice. But even some young people, because maybe, they depend on who they're talking to, what they've heard. They just, really do believe that this is, a good solution, a reliable test, and the results from it, you can use to be 100% sure. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I want to stress the unreliability of the test, plus what you started out with too, which was like the psychological impact of that on your child, because in the moment, especially if you and your child have had the conversation before, but even if you haven't had the conversation before, I know what is communicated to that young person is, I don't trust you and I don't believe what you
are saying.
say.
And then for me as a doctor, if the child really is not sexually active, this sort of procedure or test can be traumatic for them, because this is almost close to their first sexual experience or sexually like experience, because they may never have anybody, examine their genital area in that way. And if they really are innocent and they've been forced to go through this, that's something on top of this, the psychological impact of the parent not believing them. They would have to keep constantly replaying this whole scenario, So that's one issue I have, why I really don't want to perform this test, because one is unnecessary, it's unreliable, and you don't know the impact that it's going to have on the person.
Yeah, and it can be worse than whatever it is it will probably be worse than whatever it is you are trying to get answers to in the moment. So I'm putting out the appeal still, even though I know nobody can say Roma said not to do it, so it won't. But I'm gonna put out the appeal still. So
consider the facts, and whether or not you really, really need to.
Right.
This
Because even as you talk about their first kind of instance of being exposed in that way too, because isn't most people's first pap smear in the 20s, you don't usually have a pap smear when you're in under 16 and so it's this is your first introduction to this. It's against your will. It's against your will. Even when you get up in your 30s and 40s and so on, you're doing pap smears, they never get comfortable and easy. I had a conversation, in this program with some other folks, and we were talking about pap smears and how they could be made more comfortable for the people experiencing them, because it kind of is a dramatic event, because it's very, first of all, impersonal. So, you go to the doctor and they're like, go up on the desk and get a boat. Spread your legs, put them up in the stirrups, the place cold, and then they insert this cold thing into your vagina, stretch it, and it's it's a lot.
It is a bit dramatic.
It's a lot. And, people were suggesting, can they turn on the light? Can they warm up the speculum? The speculum, because that'll be, a big part of it. Can they let you know I'm about to things, so you might feel some discomfort? Are you ready? So you can breathe or prepare yourself or whatever it is. But, imagine you
as a child.
Yeah. Against your will, because at least when you're older, you're going to do a pap smear. You saying, I am going to do this thing for whatever reason. But imagine doing that thing that you're not prepared of. You don't know what it's going to be like at all, and you want to be there. Think about that, parents and guardians. Think about that. I have a random question. It's not random. But I don't know why I said that. Okay, so the hymen, it changes it can change, over time for lots of different reasons. And I saw something that said that the hymen disappearing or the hymen's presence is not, its intactness is not necessarily the cause of bleeding from the first time that there is penetrative intercourse. People kind of have the assumption that, especially for penis in vagina sex, heterosexual sex, when you have that first sex, the person with the vagina must bleed, right? But I saw something that said that sometimes the bleeding ain't even related
To the
to
hymen.
that. It's related to other things, include and bleeding and like pain and so. Is that something that's rooted in medical accuracy? Is that true?
Yes, I think that's true because some people, as you know, their first sexual experience, they don't bleed at all.
Yeah.
So it is possible to, break the hymen and not necessarily have any bleeding, but just the trauma itself from whatever, the penis going into the vagina, that in itself, the friction can cause some wear and tear. So sometimes that may be the cause of the bleeding as well. I'm sure people without hymens who are very sexually active may have experienced that before. Not regularly, but, once or twice, you may notice some bleeding afterwards. It could be on the entrance or deep inside the vagina, The act of sexual intercourse itself does have the risk of causing some tears that may lead to bleeding.
Yeah. Okay. So does that mean then that other actions can be taken to like reduce the possibility of bleeding? So for example, sometimes, and this comes in with like the conversations around tightness of the vagina. Sometimes the vagina is tight because it's not properly lubricated and it's not ready yet for, insertion or penetration or whatever it is. Could that help too? And I think for like people, especially people with vaginas having like penetrative penis sex, their first time having sex in a lot of, let me see, you watch Forever on Netflix?
No.
Okay, anyways, let's think about all of the shows, movies, and so when people's first time is very magical and very slow and they take their time and they warm up and all of that. You say unrealistic.
As in a lot of the shows, how they
Okay, so it's
describe,
unrealistic.
try to show first time sexual intercourse.
Yeah, so I would guess that a lot of first times are not that and nowhere near that. So it's like people not ready, especially if it's everybody's first time, they're really easing into it, the kind of slamming.
And it's very difficult to be ready, to be honest.
Yeah.
How do you prepare for an experience you've never had? So
Clock it.
there's no way to prepare yourself. The most you can do is try to relax, but it's very difficult.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. It's similar to having a pap smear or having a vaginal exam with a speculum the first time. It doesn't matter what you do. It's not a pleasant experience, and so you yourself going to try to clamp down to try to protect yourself from the pain, which increases the friction and the risk of trauma. So yes, that is why these shows trying to demonstrate the first time is almost always unrealistic.
Isn't it possible though? Isn't it achievable?
Of course it is.
Oh yeah,
Of course. But it takes the other person to cooperate because the other person are not feeling pain.
Yeah.
So they're just like, let's
right. They have to
do what I want to
do.
But if they, try to work and compromise with the person who has a vagina, then
and communicate.
Yes.
Yeah.
So go slow.
Use lube.
Lots of lubricant.
Yeah.
Once a person with vagina relax, it's possible that, it's less traumatic.
Yeah.
Probably will be traumatic.
Yeah.
But it can be less traumatic.
But it can be helped. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And reduce the chances of developing cuts and tears.
Okay, so which obviously, increase your exposure to STIs and so on.
Correct,
so
yes.
It doesn't have to be a case where like first sex is painful, is bleeding, is all of those things. It can be.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
just realizing that size could impact
Yeah.
the process
Mm-hmm.
and the experience itself. So,
what would you recommend?
of course, the same, going slow, steady, lots of lubricant, relaxing, not panicking, not clamping down.
Yeah. Easing in and listening to your partner.
Yes.
So if they say, man, ready yet, you stop. You
Stop.
do something
Breathe.
else. Yeah. If they say, okay, I'm ready now,
Mm-hmm.
you could try again.
The other person has to be patient.
Yeah. But that's what good sex is, right? Like patience and all of those things. Okay. So let's take a break here at 8:40 and come back and continue talking about hymens and virginity. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Pleasure Pulse. I'm here with my guest, Dr. Joanne Matthew, and we've been talking about hymens and virginity. Partly in a medical kind of sense, a biological kind of sense, but also in a social and cultural sense, because we have been discussing how both of these things have like huge cultural resonance, cultural ideas behind them, how a lot of what is pushed to happen, within doctors' offices and so is based on our cultural beliefs outside of it, our ideas about hymens, myths about hymens, our ideas about virginity and so. And when you started off, not when you started off, but earlier in the show, you raised the question, like, what is even virginity? Because what is even virginity? I know some people will be like, what do you mean? Like, we've known what virginity is forever, but have we?
Have we? It's an interesting discussion.
It's very interesting thoughts.
My thoughts?
Yeah, sorry, you want me to go with my thoughts?
Yes, you go first.
Okay, so typically we define a virgin as somebody who has never had sex. The last show I had, my guest and I, Diloma, I don't even remember how it came out. But she was like, what is sex? And then it was like, exactly, because even though we have like generally kind of defined, and when I said generally, I mean like culturally, socially defined these terms in particular ways, that's not what they mean necessarily, and that's not what they mean in every space you're going to or with everybody that you talk to, because sex looks very different to different people.
Right.
So sometimes when we say sex, we mean penis in vagina, like
Usually that's what it
usually
most people assume to.
But then we exclude all the other types of sex that people have, and also all the other bodies that have sex with each other. So penis in vagina, penetration, insertion, that's just one part of it. What about all the other holes? But also not just, your orifices.
Give them special names, some of them.
But it still ends with sex.
Right, because
oral sex.
Right, oral sex, and for example,
anal sex, it still ends with sex.
Without adding anything before, adding a word before, and you just say sex.
You just mean penis.
Understood. Penis into the vagina.
We should change from that, because that's just,
well,
heteronormative, but let's not
And a little
use
bit of
big
the
words
patriarchy.
and all of those things. And so the idea that sex is only between and only valuable between people with penises and people with vaginas. The idea that sex is only for reproduction and those kinds of things, and nobody believes that.
Some people still believe that.
It's interesting because some folks that I watch, like let's say they have like 7 children, I assume that they only had sex 7 times. Just because like of how they talk about sex, and it's rooting in reproduction. It's like, okay, if you believe that sex is only for reproduction, then it must mean that you have only had sex to reproduce.
And actually, I believe there are some people like that, very few.
Probably.
It's
yeah,
possible.
And that's like, okay, this is my duty to do this thing.
Especially
for
if
this.
they're very religious.
Yeah.
Strictly
Yeah.
religious.
I don't think that applies to most people. That is some people, but that doesn't apply to most people. So most people have lots of different kinds of sex. You have sex involving more than one vulva. You have sex involving more than one penis. You have sex. People with penises and people with vaginas have anal sex, so you don't even involve the vagina. They have oral sex. They have all sorts of sex.
Yes.
You can have sex with toys. You can have sex. You could have phone sex, because we say phone sex, but it is a kind of sex,
and there's actually no physical contact.
None at all.
People still acknowledge
call
it,
sex. Just like sexting. So you have phone sex where you could be on the phone and you're talking sexy things to the person, and you also have sexting where you're messaging sexy things to the person. Like all of those have sex at the end of it, but we don't think of them when we're thinking about
what is sex.
So what is sex is a complex thing, and some people define it all sorts of ways. Some people might call using their hands, their digits, and so sex. And some people might not, so it just depends on who you're talking to. And I think that's why, when y'all asking people questions, you try to get very specific to not just be asking about the name of the thing, but the content of the thing, right? Like you ask them, okay, are you having penetrative sex, or are you having anal insertion, like those kinds of things,
yes.
Instead of just being sex.
Right, exactly.
Right, yeah, okay. Because sometimes too, depending on how you define it, like, I know this, like, it's connecting to the virginity things. In some churches, like in Catholic Church, I remember taking an abstinence pledge, and I remember reading about some religious groups, not here necessarily, who, in order to maintain their virginity, would only engage in oral and anal sex. But for them, it was like, no, I've never had sex, because I define sex and I define virginity as only penis in vagina. So yes, I am still a virgin.
Exactly. So, and some people may disagree.
Yeah. And if you subjected those people to a hymen test, you might very well find
that they have hymen and conclude that they are virgins.
They've had every other kind of sex. Like there was this tweet, and it was like, I'm saving my virginity for my husband, and until then I'll keep having sex with who I want. Like they were defining sex and virginity differently. Like maybe like virginity was something that you saved for your husband. So once you saved something for marriage, and you could do everything else. So it's, something like that. I found that very interesting.
And
so
there's this thing where some women who may have been sexually active, may choose to get surgery.
Yeah, to become
replace
virgins
their
again.
hymen.
Yeah,
because it's very important, especially in their culture or religion, that they must bleed during the first intercourse.
Otherwise,
and then some persons would say that if they haven't had sex over a certain amount of time, couple years, then they are still
like
virgin.
you come
they
back.
reclaim their virginity.
Why not? Why not? All of them are constructs, right? So
Exactly.
you can, yeah, reclaim it for sure. So, like I said, some people have not had penis in vagina sex, but they've had other kinds of sex. But as I said, there's sex involving more than one vulva. There's sex involving penises. There's sex involving anuses, anusi.
But I don't know if to answer your question, I once heard someone say, in with regards to the definition of sex, that once it was a process that involved having an orgasm, then sex was had.
I have heard that too. That if you didn't orgasm, you didn't have sex. Or the sex didn't count. And in a Meg Thee Stallion song, she was like, it didn't happen if the penis wasn't slapping. Like, if it wasn't good, it also doesn't count. Which is, I think, also connected to the idea around bodies. And so, like, how many bodies you have. So it's like keeping your number
to keep the
not
body
down.
count
Right.
low.
So like you being very particular about who gets to count in your bodies. That's what I think. But the orgasm point is very interesting too. So if that's how people defining sex, which I think a lot of people do, like that's the marker of it.
And so because of that, then you wouldn't, it's not, that's one way, it's not only down to penis and vagina penetration sex.
Yeah. Okay, so virginity, I think we can agree, is a social construct and ain't gonna a real medical definition. You know what's really interesting about biology especially is that there are so many anomalies in it. Like we often turn to biology to support or justify the social and cultural beliefs that we have, but biology is like, actually we don't know what's going on here
things,
either.
Things don't always follow the rules.
Yeah, like there's no template. Like nothing looks the same. And remember, I asked you about intersex. One day we'll be able to talk about intersex people, because even that, like we want to send people in penis or vagina, man or woman, but even that, like
Even
within
then,
biology, it's like
it can get very complicated because
Actually-
some people want to argue, okay, well, if we can't argue that genitals define the gender, then we can argue chromosomes.
but even
But
that,
even in chromosomes, you end up, they're not following the rules.
yeah,
you know.
and even internally, because you could have like male testes, a penis or whatever, and you could have an ovary, you could have all sorts of things,
Yes.
right? So anyways,
That's another time.
another term. So it's a social construct, and it doesn't have a single medical definition. I saw this thing I was reading from the Bible. I wasn't reading the Bible, but
It's okay to read the Bible.
it was in the Bible, and it was Deuteronomy 20 something, and it was essentially like a man marries a woman. If a man takes a wife and after sleeping with her dislikes her and slanders her and gives her a bad name, saying, I married this woman, but when I approached her, I didn't know of her virginity, then the woman's father and mother shall bring to the town elders at the gate proof that she was a virgin. Her father will say to the elders, I gave my daughter in marriage to this man, but he dislikes. So now he has slandered her and said, I did not find your daughter to be virgin. But here is the proof of my daughter's virginity. Then her parents shall display the cloth, like, that they had sex on. So the bloodied cloth, the bloodied sheets, they will walk around.
So, from a long time ago, this whole idea of the presence of blood as
an
proof
indicator, of virginity.
of the first sexual intercourse experience. And 3, so what happened if she didn't bleed? What happened if they didn't keep the clot?
What happens is if she is not proven to be a virgin, then she's stoned to death. That's what happens. Yeah, because she has done an outrageous thing by being promiscuous while still in her father's house.
So she's being promiscuous because she did not bleed.
Yeah, because you should bleed if you are. Yeah. So I also saw, because I was just like looking up, myths around virginity and so, and it was saying that in some cases, like, I think this was around like the time you had queens and so, they would have like asked one of their maidens to I don't know if they would ask them to have sex with their husband because they would bleed. Or I saw something where they would like, they could scratch themselves to cause themselves to bleed. So they would just give themselves a cut, or they would use chicken blood or so. But they went like to great lengths
to try to
supply this blood.
I see.
To prove
that's so interesting
virginity. And I think one thing we could think about is, would we do things like that in 2025?
If we had no choice, perhaps. But in 2025, I don't think people are asking for. Well, let me don't say.
That's why I was like, because you're talking about the virginity test. Right. I'm like, if we can see these and be like, that's ridiculous.
But it's possible that there are men out here in 2025 who still expect to see blood on a woman's supposedly first sexual intercourse experience.
We still struggle to identify the clitoris. So, of course, we are still holding on
because people, men don't really see sex as this pleasure for women. It's just strictly pleasure for men themselves. So.
It's like, I remember when I was at UE, one of the things I read was like, women, people with vaginas are disposable receptacles for semen. Yeah. Anyways, so, but then the other thing is, how, and we're winding down, we have 3 more minutes, how virginity is valued in women but not in men. How it's like ridiculed.
How do you show proof of a man's virginity? Why is it only
where is their hymen?
The women
where is their hymen?
So if I am with a man and he tells me he's a virgin, how
do you where's the test?
There's none.
And it's when we learn of men who have not had sex, we laugh after them, like the 40-year-old virgin, like American Pie, like these movies that are built, the whole plot of the movie is trying to have sex. Like, we don't have an equivalent of that for, women, people with...
Yeah. Women are supposed to be pure.
Yeah.
And men are supposed to be promiscuous.
Which is unfortunate. Because then you have men, who, I don't know. I've had men tell me, like, they felt like pieces of meat and so with people.
And that is sad.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, yes.
Yeah, it is. So, yeah. Anyways, let's end, apart from your final thoughts. This was just thoughts on virginities and hymens. On some interesting things that I found. I remember years ago there was this OnlyFans model. She was somewhere and she was selling her virginity. You remember?
Oh, yes.
And I think it was like millions. It's millions that she got for it. I think I saw somebody raise like 40. It was more than one person, I think.
Wow.
I think I saw. I think the one that we might be thinking of. I think she did not go through with it, and I think I saw something with her saying like she's still making money from other things.
Okay.
And I think I saw one that was like 40 million and one that was like $1.7 million. Imagine that.
What do you think of that? Would you have done something like that?
To be honest, $1 million.
$40 million, maybe.
I'm like the feminist part is like, no, principle. The realistic part.
It's like $40 million.
Who would like to build a house, can live comfortably. It's like...
I can't blame them for doing it.
Yeah, I mean, that is somebody capitalizing on the really like things that we have arbitrarily placed value on.
Exactly.
So why not? Yeah. Anyway, and then I also saw that in the UK years ago, there were like forced virginity tests for immigrants, in the 1970s. Yeah.
What was the reasons?
I don't know. I mean, a lot of these countries, not the UK. Yeah, I don't know what the reason, but a lot of them have like kind of eugenics kind of.
Yeah, they want to control
the population. I'm not sure, but I don't doubt that has something to do with it. Anyway, final thoughts on hymens and virginity.
Okay, so the hymen again is the thin tissue that covers the vagina. That sometimes is lost during penetration, and sometimes that may result in bleeding. But sometimes it is lost even without penetration, and sometimes after penetration, there is no bleeding, and the absence of the hymen doesn't mean the person is not a virgin or is sexually active. And so we should try to avoid these virginity checks because the test is not reliable. Seeing the hymen or not seeing the hymen does not indicate whether or not a person is a virgin or not. And on that note, virginity is a social construct. The lack of penetration doesn't necessarily mean a person is a virgin, and because there are other types of sex that exist. So that's my final remarks, and you can add.
Okay, thank you for saying that. I want to categorically state that the solution or suggestion is not to abandon the hymen test for another type of test of virginity. I just had to make, that clear. So Dr. Joanne is not saying this is an unreliable test, so find a reliable test. That's
correct. Yes,
that's not the conversation.
That's not what I'm saying.
That's not the conversation that we're having. We're all talking about safer sex methods. We're talking about contraception. Like, those are the conversations that you should be having with the young people. Your partners around you, because some people could still be, expecting, if they find, let's say, a 30-year-old person with a vagina who's a virgin to bleed, or, so those expectations, those myths, those ideas don't necessarily end. They we just kind of, some of them like follow us through life. So the conversations that we should be having with the people around us should be about safer sex, should be about contraception, should be about reducing the risk of pregnancy if that's not something that you desire, of transmitting STIs and so on. So you want to talk about like having responsible sex, whatever that is, whatever kind of sex people are having, and not just this focus on virginity. Because like people, as we said, it's not a real thing. It's a social construct. And people could be maybe not at risk in their genitals, but at risk elsewhere because of the other types of sex that they're having, right? So let's focus in on what we really should be focusing on and ensuring that people are able to have safer, pleasurable sexual experiences. And that is where I will lead you. Thank you so much for joining us for another conversation. I will see you all next Tuesday. As usual, I'm wishing you a pleasurable evening and saying good night here. Bye.